Okay, I want to go over some key elements to making a bow drill set. This is a spindle, and this is a pretty good size for a spindle. It's about the width of my index finger. I don't want it any wider than my thumb. So this is about as wide as I'll go, typically. And for the length of the spindle, I would like it to be as long as my forearm to start off with. Because what that does, it just gives more area for the cordage that's wrapped around to travel up and down, because it's going to move up and down. And if it's too short, what's going to happen is, because of the Egyptian bow drill, the angle that you have to be at, it can get bound up, or it can run into your foot depending on the angle. So for your bow, I like to have one that's about the length from my shoulder to my wrist. So this is ideal here. So you don't want it too short, because then the actual rotations will be too short. The strokes that you have to take will be way too short. For the fireboard, I want to make sure that it's thick enough. This is about as thin as I would want a bow drill fireboard. And this one is about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. Same thing for this one. This is the one I've used in previous videos. So about an inch is ideal, because it gives plenty of room for the powder to build up. It gives plenty of room for the spindle to bore down inside the notch that you've made. If your spindle is too small, it'll go through quick. So if you have a small spindle, you need a thicker fireboard. If you have a larger spindle, you can go with a thinner fireboard. For your socket, it's ideal to use a hardwood, and they'll typically polish off. This is Bodark or Osage Orange, also called horse apple. It almost petrifies, so I love this wood. I've had this one for a long time. You can use rocks, you can use other materials. You'll see where people make an indention in their knife handle, especially at the metal part, or glue something on that's kind of concave to use. That works too. But you want something nice and smooth. The problem with some rocks is if they're not polished, like this one has limestone on the outside of chert, the spindle can get bound up. So it gets bound up, it gets caught, creates additional friction, making it more likely for you to use more energy to try to get that coal to form. So you want to be as efficient as possible so you don't get exhausted. But when making a bow drill set, you want a bow. I like Egyptian bow drill, so it has more cordage. You want a fireboard, at least about an inch thick to 3/4 of an inch. You want a spindle that's, for me, because I have pretty large hands, between the size of my index finger and my thumb. So I want it right in between there. And then you want some sort of socket that's nice and polished, that is nothing's going to get bound up on, and prevents that from popping out and burning you, because that can happen as well. You're pressing down and it can pop out. Now, as for posture, what you don't want to do when making or attempting a bow drill, so let me just put that in place so that you can see, is have your arm far away from the body. So you notice here my arm is not touching my knee. I actually want to lean my chest along the top part of my thigh. So I'm leaning down so my chest is touching. And once I do that, I wrap my arm around and kind of lock it into place. So as I lean forward with body weight, that's where a lot of my adjustments are coming from. I don't want my arm way out here. I actually want it wrapped in and locked in place, because if you're way out here, what's going to happen is that's going to move around. You're more likely to lose your spindle or lose control of it. And then it makes you use more muscle than you have to. By locking it in place, I don't have to control it so much with my arm. I'm controlling it with my whole body. So it's kind of locked in. And all this downward pressure of me moving forward is done really by pressing the leg into the arm, and the arm is locked into the body. So let's go ahead and make a quick coal just to show you all of those elements. Now I'm really close to the wall, so I'm going to have to go out here. So I'm going to start by wrapping at the bottom. If you're using an Egyptian bow drill, I'll talk about other forms of bow drill like hand tension bow drills and tension bow drills. So that's probably enough wraps. If you notice that it slips, you can tighten this down, but that's about as tight as I can get this one. I'm going to put that in place. I'm going to lock this in with my leg, and then I'm just going to go back and forth. Now at first, really you want this foot up as close as you can to that socket area. So I'm going to go back and forth first just to kind of build some dust. So I'm not trying to get the coal right now. I'm just building the dust. So I need to rewrap that. So you notice how that got bound up at the top? That's because this spindle is way too short. So it makes it real easy for this part to get up here along the thin part, and it'll get stuck. Also, I need to keep this, instead of being perfectly parallel to the ground, at a slight angle. So now I'm going to go ahead, now that I've got dust in that notch, I'm going to go ahead and make a coal. So I can see the smoke coming out the dust, so I know I've got it. And this is another reason when you're learning the bow drill, you want to start with a low ignition wood. Don't start with something that's difficult at first, or you're going to burn yourself out. Try to practice this new skill, if it's new to you, by using a low ignition wood like yucca, soto, even agave. So you notice I kind of tap that to get the coal to come away from the fireboard. I'm going to build that coal up. Take some more dust here. Just like I showed in the other video, if I needed to, I could use a coal extender like this mushroom. I'm going to break a piece off real quick. And it takes a little bit. To get that coal to burn into the mushroom. And that'll continue to smolder for a long period of time. And notice I had this little piece of wood at the bottom to catch that coal so I could dump it into my tinder bundle. So your tinder bundle needs to be huge. I'll make a separate video on that. Ideally larger than a bird's nest. That would be my minimum size, would be a bird's nest size. And so now I've got this, and I've got multiple attempts. So if this coal doesn't work and I fail at blowing this into flame, I've got my coal extender over here. Now that could be anything from dust when you were making your fireboard. You could have a pile of dust somewhere. You could take a coal extender like this mushroom. You can even burn it into a thin piece of wood that's used to transport the coal. Now that coal has burned into this piece of wood because it's thin enough, it's a low ignition wood. So it's going to give me a better chance. A lot of different stuff you can do. You can bundle up something that's nice and fluffy like this coconut husk or cedar bark. Drop your coal in that. Get it to extend first here before you drop that into your bird's nest. But those are all major elements for any bow drill.